Everything has to be paid for. Guantanamo Bay Detention Facility has held 779 prisoners since 2002. As of 2024, approximately 30 remain. The total cost of operating Guantanamo, approximately $7 billion over 22 years, according to Defense Department data and congressional budget analysis. Cost per prisoner, approximately $9 million each over the facility's lifetime. Annual cost per remaining prisoner, approximately $13 million, 25 times more expensive than housing an inmate at America's most secure Supermax prison. For comparison, annual tuition at Harvard, approximately $52,000. Guantanamo costs 250 times more per person per year. This episode reveals the economics of prisoners of war, how capturing enemies costs exponentially more than killing them, why detention facilities become permanent financial burdens, and how the decision to take prisoners rather than eliminate targets creates obligations lasting decades and costing billions. The capture versus kill calculation. In pure economic terms, the cost difference between killing and capturing is enormous. Killing an enemy combatant in combat. Cost of ammunition, $100 depending on weapon, rifle bullet to missile. No ongoing costs. Enemy permanently neutralized. Capturing an enemy combatant. Initial capture operation costs, $1,000 to $50,000, depending on special operations involvement, helicopter extraction, initial processing. Transportation to detention facility, $5,000 to $1,000. Annual detention costs, $50,000 to $13,000 depending on facility. Duration, potentially decades. Total lifetime cost, $500,000 to $50,000 plus per prisoner. The ratio, capturing costs $500,000 to $50,000 times more than killing, depending on the facility and duration. Of course, this ignores ethical, legal, and moral considerations, but in pure economic terms, taking prisoners is astronomically more expensive than not taking them. The Guantanamo cost breakdown. Guantanamo's extreme costs stem from multiple factors. Security personnel, approximately 1-800 staff for 30 prisoners. Ratio, 60 guards per prisoner. For comparison, a typical U.S. maximum security prison has approximately 1 guard per 3 to 5 prisoners. Guantanamo has 60 times more staff per prisoner. Annual personnel costs alone, approximately $250 million. Infrastructure maintenance. The facility requires continuous upgrades, repairs, and operations in a remote location requiring everything to be shipped. Annual infrastructure and logistics costs, approximately $150 million. Legal proceedings, military commissions, defense counsel, prosecution, translators, documentation. Annual legal costs, approximately $50–75 million. Medical care, specialized medical staff and facilities for aging detainees. Annual medical costs, approximately $20 to $30 million. Total annual operating cost, approximately $450–500 million for 30 prisoners. Per prisoner annual cost, approximately $13 to $17 million. They said Guantanamo would extract intelligence and ensure security. They got the world's most expensive prison housing 30 people at $13 million each annually. The comparative prison economics. U.S. Federal Supermax Prison, ADX Florence, annual cost per prisoner, approximately $75,000 to $80,000. Guantanamo annual cost per prisoner, approximately $13 million. The ratio, Guantanamo costs 162 times more than America's most secure domestic prison. What is the additional $12.9 million per prisoner buy? Geographic isolation, Cuba. Military guard force instead of civilian corrections officers. Extensive legal infrastructure for military commissions. political symbolism and international controversy. From a pure detention security perspective, ADX Florence has never had an escape. It houses terrorists, cartel leaders, and spies. It costs $75,000 per prisoner annually. Guantanamo has the same security record at 162 times the cost. The additional expense buys not security, but a specific legal and political framework. The prisoner aging problem. Prisoners age, costs increase. When Guantanamo opened in 2002, most prisoners were in their 20s, 40s. Now they're in their 40s, 60s. Elderly prisoners require more medical care, chronic conditions, age-related issues, specialized facilities, wheelchair access, medical equipment, long-term care planning. The original $13 million per prisoner annually will increase as medical costs rise. Similarly, prisoners held by various countries create decades-long obligations. Israel holds approximately 10,000 Palestinian prisoners at any given time, according to Israeli prison service data and human rights organizations. Annual cost of the prison system, approximately $300 million. Cost per prisoner, $20,000, $30,000 annually. These prisoners serve sentences ranging from months to life. Many have been imprisoned for decades. The cumulative cost over decades exceeds billions. Some Palestinian prisoners have been held for 30, 40 years. At $25,000 annually, a 40-year imprisonment costs $1 million per prisoner. The infrastructure multiplication. Prisons require infrastructure that multiplies costs. Building a detention facility. Guantanamo initial construction and setup, approximately $500 million, $1 billion. Average U.S. federal prison construction, approximately $100 to $150 million. Operating the facility requires permanent staff regardless of prisoner population. Guantanamo costs barely decreased as the prisoner population fell from 680 at peak to 30 today. The infrastructure and staffing remain largely unchanged. This creates a fixed cost problem. The facility costs roughly the same to operate whether it holds 680 prisoners or 30. When population was 680, cost per prisoner approximately $1.5 million annually. With population of 30, cost per prisoner approximately $13.17 million annually. The per capita cost increased 10x as population decreased because fixed costs don't scale down. The legal cost accumulation. Prisoners of war, especially in asymmetric conflicts, generate enormous legal costs. Guantanamo Military Commission proceedings have cost approximately $500 million over 20-plus years, according to congressional analysis and legal cost tracking. The 9/11 case alone has cost approximately $300 million in legal proceedings and is still not resolved after 20-plus years. For comparison, the prosecution and trial of the Boston Marathon bomber cost approximately $5 million in the civilian system and reached a verdict in 2 years. The specialized military commission system costs 60 times more and takes 10 times longer than civilian courts. These legal costs are in addition to detention costs. The total cost per Guantanamo prisoner includes both detention, $13 million annually, and legal proceedings, hundreds of millions total. The international prisoner economics. Other countries face similar prisoner cost explosions. The International Criminal Tribunal for Yugoslavia detained and tried 161 defendants between 1993 and 2017. Total tribunal cost, approximately $2 billion over 24 years. Cost per defendant, approximately $12.4 million. These were primarily detention and trial costs, similar to Guantanamo but for war crimes trials rather than detention without trial. The International Criminal Court has an annual budget of approximately $170 million, with 21 defendants in custody or on trial currently. Per defendant cost, approximately $8 million annually. High-value prisoners in international contexts cost millions per year in specialized facilities, security, and legal proceedings. The exchange value paradox. Some prisoners have strategic exchange value that theoretically justifies detention costs. Israel's detention of thousands of Palestinians provides exchange leverage for hostage situations. The 2011 Shalit exchange released 1,027 prisoners for one soldier. If those 1,027 prisoners cost $25,000 annually to detain, the annual cost was approximately $25.7 million. Over the years they were detained, varying from months to decades, the cumulative cost could exceed $500 million. Was retrieving Gilad Shalit worth $500 million in detention costs? In human terms, obviously yes. In economic terms, wildly disproportionate. But the prisoners weren't detained solely for exchange purposes. Many were serving sentences for criminal acts. The exchange value is a secondary benefit, not the primary justification. The indefinite detention cost spiral. When detention is indefinite, costs become essentially infinite. Guantanamo prisoners without trial or release date create open-ended financial obligations. If the remaining 30 prisoners stay for another 20 years at current costs, $10 billion additional. If they stay for 30 years, many are in their 40s, 50s, could live another 30-plus years, $15 billion additional. The decision to detain indefinitely creates an unbounded cost problem. Syria's civil war created thousands of ISIS prisoners held by Kurdish forces. These prisoners have no trial, no release date, no home country willing to take them. Annual cost of detaining approximately 10,000 ISIS prisoners in Syria, approximately $5,100 million, according to Kurdish administration and international aid organization estimates. If detention continues for 20-30 years, $1 to $3 billion total. No one wants to release them, no one wants to try them, no one wants to pay for them, but someone must. The domestic political prisoner costs. Some countries maintain large political prisoner populations that create significant economic burdens. Russia holds approximately 701,000 political prisoners, according to human rights organization estimates. Cost of specialized detention and monitoring, approximately $50 to $100 million annually. China holds an estimated 1 million plus Uyghurs in detention, re-education facilities in Xinjiang, according to international assessments and investigative reporting. The estimated cost of building and operating these facilities, $10–20 billion over several years for construction, plus $1 to $2 billion annually for operations. This is an enormous economic burden even for a large economy, $20+ billion total, to detain a population that could otherwise be economically productive. The opportunity cost: these detainees could be working, generating tax revenue, consuming goods. Instead, they require security spending and produce nothing. The repatriation impossibility. Many prisoners cannot be released or repatriated, creating permanent obligations. Guantanamo prisoners include individuals whose home countries won't accept them, who face persecution if returned, or who are deemed too dangerous to release. This creates a catch-22, too dangerous to release, too problematic to try, too expensive to hold, but impossible to solve. The result: infinite detention at infinite cost. Similarly, ISIS prisoners in Syria cannot be repatriated because their home countries, Europe, Central Asia, North Africa, refuse to take them. The Kurdish forces holding them lack resources and increasingly demand international support. If international community doesn't fund detention, prisoners may be released by default. If they do fund detention, they create permanent obligations. The prisoner problem has no solution and therefore no end to costs. The comparative refugee costs. Interestingly, prisoners often cost more to detain than refugees cost to support. UNHCR estimates the average annual cost to support a refugee approximately $1,000 to $3,000 depending on location and services. Guantanamo costs per prisoner $13 million annually, 4,300 to 13,000 times more than supporting a refugee. This comparison is imperfect. Prisoners require security that refugees don't, but it illustrates the enormous cost of detention versus other humanitarian obligations. For the cost of detaining 30 Guantanamo prisoners, $450 million annually, the international community could support approximately 150,000 to 450,000 refugees for a year. The veterans versus prisoners comparison. The U.S. spends approximately $13 million annually per Guantanamo prisoner. The average annual VA spending per veteran, approximately $11,000 to $12,000. Guantanamo prisoners receive approximately 1,000 times more government expenditure per capita than American veterans. This isn't an argument for reducing prisoner treatment. It's an illustration of how expensive specialized detention becomes. The political optics are terrible, spending more on foreign detainees than on veterans. But the structural costs of the specialized facility create this disparity. The long-term obligation transfer. Prisoner cost transfer across generations of taxpayers. Guantanamo has cost $7 billion from 2002 to 2024, paid by taxpayers over 22 years. If it continues another 30 years at current costs, an additional $13.5 billion, paid by taxpayers who were children or not yet born when 9/11 occurred. These future taxpayers didn't decide to create Guantanamo. They didn't vote for the policies that led to these detentions, but they will pay for them. This is the generational cost transfer of prisoner detention. Decisions made in 2002 create financial obligations through 2050 plus. The closure impossibility. Closing Guantanamo would eliminate ongoing costs but requires solving the prisoner problem. Options. 1. Release all prisoners. Politically unacceptable security concerns. 2. Transfer to U.S. prisons. Politically controversial, legal complications, $500+ million in facility preparation. 3. Transfer to other countries. Many countries refuse, legal obstacles. 4. Continue indefinite detention. Current situation, costs continue forever. The political impossibility of options 1 to 3 means option 4 continues by default. The facility that everyone agrees should close remains open because closing it is harder than continuing to pay $450 million annually. The system revelation. The economics of prisoners reveal a fundamental truth. Killing is cheap, capturing is expensive, and indefinite detention is infinite cost. A bullet costs $1. A prisoner for life costs $1,000 to $50,000. This doesn't mean killing is preferable. Ethical, legal, and moral considerations obviously matter more than economics. But it does mean that decisions to take prisoners create decades-long financial obligations that vastly exceed the immediate tactical costs. Guantanamo, $7 billion spent, $13+ billion more likely. Total, $20+ billion for 779 prisoners over their lifetimes. Per prisoner, $25+ million over lifetime. Compare this to the cost of any alternative approach. Civilian trials, $5–10 million per case. Military tribunals domestically, $10–20 million per case. Not capturing in the first place, $0 ongoing costs. The decision to create Guantanamo generated a financial obligation that will outlast most of the people who made that decision, paid for by taxpayers who weren't asked, for prisoners who can neither be released nor tried. Everything has to be paid for, and prisoners of war are paid for not once in their capture but continuously for decades, in detention costs that exceed elite university tuition by 250 times, in legal proceedings that cost $300 million and never reach verdicts, and in political impossibilities that create infinite obligations no one wants but everyone must fund. Subscribe to The Price of Conflict to understand how capture costs millions while killing costs dollars.